The world out there is full of unexplored jungles, lost pyramids, and cursed temples that are just waiting for an unprepared explorer to slip up. Collapsing floors, creaky bridges, poison darts, fire jets, and rolling boulders. You can expect all that and even more. This is Outgunned Adventure, a Pulp Adventure RPG, and it's the first full genre book expansion for the Outgunned line. Now, a few little things off the top. Two Little Mice very kindly sent me a copy of this review with the short adventure Fall of Atlantis. As well, Outgunned Adventure is meant to be able to be played as a standalone product from Outgunned, so in this review I'm going to be seeing how it stands on its own. I haven't looked at the main game or the other expansions, so some of the stuff I talk about in this video might be covered by other books. Anyways, with that out of the way, and without thinking twice, let's jump into Outgunned Adventure. There were two things that got me excited about this game. One was the setting. The idea of playing an Indiana Jones style RPG sounded great, and I was intrigued by the dice system, which instead of trying to equal or beat a certain difficulty class or target number, you're using a pool of d6s to try and roll 2, 3, or 4 of a kind. The actual numerical results of the dice don't matter, so getting 3 6s is not any better than getting 3 1s. I hadn't seen something like this before, and I was keen to test it out. It's a pretty neat system that is easy to understand the basics, but there's also additional mechanics that add a good amount of depth to it. In this game, you are very much expected to push your luck and do a lot of rerolls. For example, let's say you're rolling 5 dice and need to roll 3 of a kind to succeed at a task. As long as you rolled at least 2 of a kind, you can re-roll your other dice in hopes of improving your success. However, if your roll doesn't get improved, you lose your 2 of a kind. But you could also choose not to re-roll, and instead give your basic success to a friend, or use it to lessen the impact of a failed roll. This system allows dice rolls to almost become their own minigame, where you have to decide where, when, and how far to try and push your luck. Off the start, I was worried that this much rolling might slow down the game, but my players got the hang of it very quickly and it wasn't an issue at all. Anyways, while it is possible to fail a roll, failure itself doesn't really exist in Outgunned Adventure. The game is designed so that the story always moves forward. Pages 78 and 79 are dedicated to helping you make sure that the action never stops. You might have failed to catch the bad guy before he got on the train, but there is going to be a motorcycle or a biplane close by that just happens to have the keys in the ignition. You failed your roll to jump across the chasm. This doesn't mean that you fall to your death. Instead, you just barely made it, but your gun fell into the bottomless depths below. Now what are you going to do? Or maybe you failed the roll to escape the boulder barreling after you? The game doesn't end there with your hero being pancaked by a 5-ton rock. Instead, you will lose some grit, we'll come back to that soon, and the boulder crashes over you and blocks your exit. Time for a new plan. So now that you've got an idea of the primary systems of the game, let's take a look at what kind of characters you'll be playing. Character creation is pretty quick and straightforward, but you still get to make some fun choices to make your character unique. There are 10 roles to choose from that include options like the daredevil, the captain, the heart, the professor, the scoundrel, and more. Each of these comes with a catchphrase, flaw, background, skills, feats, and gear. Each role also includes a list of film characters that inspired it, so you can immediately get an idea of what type of character you're aiming for. Once you've picked your role, you can select from 15 tropes, which sets the archetype you have in mind. Some options are action archaeologist, reluctant hero, cowardly lion, gentle giant, or proper gentleman or lady. Each trope will give you extra dice for certain skills and a list of feats to choose from. Let's bring up a character sheet and go through a few features of your character. Here you can see the dice pools you use. Every time you make a roll in this game, you'll choose an attribute, one of these 5 big headings like brawn, nerves, smooth, focus, or crime, and pair it with a skill. You roll as many dice as you have filled in diamonds. You're not even limited to pairing skills with the attribute it's under. That's just a suggestion for what generally makes the most sense. You might want to hotwire a car and feel that crime and fix works better than focus and fix. This makes the skills a bit more open-ended than in most games, and you can really use skills in a way that fits your character best. I know I said earlier that failure doesn't exist in Outgunned Adventure. That doesn't mean that there aren't consequences to failed rolls. This is where the grit comes in that I mentioned earlier. Grit is essentially your health here, but losing it doesn't necessarily mean that you've been shot or crushed by that massive boulder. Rather, it measures how many times your grit has managed to save your life. Every character has 12 grit boxes. Every time you fail on certain rolls, you'll have to mark off a certain number of boxes. If you have already filled in all the boxes and have to fill in more, then you instead have to roll on the death roulette. You begin the game with 1 lethal bullet in your chamber. If you roll a 1 on your d6, you are left for dead and are essentially out of the game. If you roll above the number of lethal bullets, then somehow you manage to survive, but you also have to fill in the next bullet, which means next time you have to roll, you'll have even less chance of surviving. Your luck can only be pushed so far for so long. This is a really fun system that goes perfectly with the theme, and that is something I love to see. Grit isn't the only way to represent the dangers your character goes through. You can also gain conditions, which are covered in the You Look box. If you gain a condition, you will lose 1d6 on each roll associated with that attribute. On the plus side, you have both luck points and spotlights. Luck can be spent to gain an extra die to roll or to activate certain feats. Spotlights are even more powerful. and let you automatically succeed on a roll, remove a condition, or even save a friend from a failed death roulette. Now, let's move on to combat. There are a few things to note here. The first of which, and this actually applies to the entire game, is that the GM pretty much doesn't make any rolls in Outgunned Adventure. Whether characters encounter a big trap or enemies with machine guns, the players are the only ones who make rolls, either action rolls or reaction rolls. Action rolls are rolls you as a player choose to make to perform, as the name suggests, an action, which might be attacking an enemy, lying to a guard, or flying a plane. Reaction rolls, on the other hand, are made to avoid traps, enemy gunshots, things like that. And while the player can choose what attribute and skill to use with action rolls, with reaction rolls, that's all up to the director. Here's how that works in combat. Enemies in this game are very abstract. There aren't big stat blocks for each individual enemy. Instead, enemies are only given 3 stats: grit, attack, and defense. This could represent one particularly formidable foe, or even a whole host of enemy soldiers. Grit works the same way for adventurers and villains. As soon as you have scored a number of successful attacks on an enemy equal to their grit, they are defeated. If the enemy is a single foe, each lost bit of grit could represent individual bruises, cuts, and wounds. Whereas, if the enemy is intended to be a big group, each grit could be one soldier being removed from the fight. The enemy's defense tells you what type of success is needed to hit them. Basic for a 2 of a kind, critical for a 3 of a kind, or extreme for 4 of a kind. The enemy's attacks works the same essentially. Remember, the director doesn't make rolls in this game, so instead, the players must make reaction rolls, scoring the relevant success type to avoid losing grit to the enemy's punches, bullets, or whatever. And interestingly, an enemy generally doesn't attack an individual adventurer. Instead, all the players with an adventurer in the fight have to make a reaction roll. This is a pretty nice, easy system that allows all the players to be involved in every round. As soon as players know the difference between basic, critical, and extreme challenges, they know how much grit they lose on failed rolls. The game just moves really smoothly. This system also does something really interesting with how adventurer attacks are thematically handled. Most RPGs have a pretty detailed list of weapons, and a big part of those games is trying to get the weapon that essentially deals the most damage. However, in Outgunned Adventure, it doesn't really make sense that your nervous professor character is running around guns blazing with a couple of shotguns. So how does this game make sure that the characters with big guns and the ones without can still be part of combat? Well, guns don't honestly add that big of an advantage. Some guns do let you roll an extra dice, but generally the most impact you'll deal out to enemies is the loss of 1 or 2 points of grit. A successful attack with a briefcase is going to inflict the loss of 1 grit to an enemy, just like a successful attack with a gun. So it really comes down to how the players want to describe what their characters are doing during combat that matters more than what weapons they have at their disposal. And because players are free to combine skills in pretty much any way, they aren't limited to only using brawn plus fight or nerves plus shoot. Instead, they might use smooth plus fix to elegantly cause a chandelier to fall down on enemy soldiers, or nerves plus drive to crash into them with a car. This approach to combat offers a lot of roleplay potential beyond just, I shoot at the bad guy again. I generally really like individual stat blocks for tons of varied enemies, but I like the idea here with how it handles large groups. A system like this could most likely be easily slotted into other RPGs, when you want to deal with large-scale battles but don't want to have to keep track of dozens of enemies. And of course, there's even more depth to the rules than what I'm going into here. There are other actions players can make in combat, options to utilize cover, ways to help your allies, and more. But hopefully you now have an idea of how things work. I haven't even covered supernatural enemies, for when you're looking to add a little bit extra to your adventure. These baddies work somewhat like regular enemies, but they also have their own special feats and actions that they can take to really change things up. Beyond the mechanics of things, what do I like about this RPG? Well, in a word, it's different. A setting and style of play that is very different from what I've done before. Instead of games about epic histories, this game is all about current action. Even though you'll probably be sifting through relics of the past, in the end, it doesn't really matter what the treasure is, it just happens to be the MacGuffin of this adventure. Characters can gain and spend cash in this, but the point of these stories is not the amassing of wealth, despite being centered around treasure. Because you're not just looking for riches, you're looking for the treasure. That's treasure with a capital T. So let's take a look at the adventure scenario, The Fall of Atlantis. This first section of the scenario is included in the core rules, but to play the rest you'll need to get the separate mission dossier. This adventure was, I'll admit, a bit hit or miss for me. I would say it's pretty railroady. That could be by design to try and keep the adventure moving forward to the next scene like in a movie. After all, Outgunned Adventure is built to replicate the very straightforward narrative of a film over the open worldness of grand sprawling RPGs. However, the set pieces that are featured in this adventure are really fun. A Viking ship suspended in a frozen chasm, chasing a zeppelin in a seaplane, and giant sea monsters. There are certainly some fun elements here, but I think I should have spent some more time building onto it than just trying to run it straight as written. There are also quite a few puzzles in this, that even when I know the correct answer, they don't really make sense to me. I feel kind of similar to this as I did after playing the Alien RPG. Outgunned Adventure is not going to be my main game, but I don't even think it's necessarily intended to be. This game knows exactly what it is and what it's trying to be. It's an RPG about chasing pulp action, designed for short cinematic campaigns where the action never stops. From the font, design choices, and little references, this is clearly a game made to tap right into the fun of your favorite adventure films. It does feel a little bit like faint praise to say that this RPG is a great palate cleanser, but I really don't think that's a bad thing. It's a fun game that won't take years to prep an adventure and should delight both players and GMs with something new and unique. And speaking of prep, I honestly felt a little bit strange running this game. I'm so used to having several large rulebooks piled up around me, fistfuls of dice, and a laptop for all my notes. Rocking up at the game table with just this little book and even smaller adventure module felt so light. I kept feeling like I must have forgotten something, but it was really nice. Although in hindsight, I certainly should have prepped a little more than I did. Anyways, that's about all from me. But please share your thoughts below about Outgunned Adventure, if you've played it or anything else in the Outgunned line. And if you haven't played it, is there anything that intrigues you the most? I'm also hoping to interview the game designers at some point, so if you have any questions you'd like me to ask them, please leave them below. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Have a great day.